Actually a few minutes over, thanks to me. We have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. Let me start with the usual announcement. Pursuant to Chapters 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting will be conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so in the following manner. Join the Zoom meeting at the link on the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so for reasons of economic hardship and despite best efforts, we will post on the Westborough Public Library's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting will be recorded. And you should all have seen a notice about the recording either when you joined or I guess when you joined or when the meeting started. Okay. Any comments or concerns about the recording or starting off the meeting?
No.
In that case, let's open with the public forum. I see we have several members of the public here, and welcome to all of you.
Now, where can we see those, Ed, the people that are on?
Basically, I can see some names here that I don't recognize.
So
Katie
Crockett is one of our architects from LPAA.
Okay.
And Mr. Boudelaire is here, and everybody else is part of the project team.
Brian Forrest. Yeah, Brian.
Okay. Steve, do you have any comments for us at this time?
Nope, just want to see what the plans are going forward.
Okay. In that case, let's move on to the discussion of the special town meeting presentation.
How do you want to lead that, Ed?
Maureen, do you have anything you would like to show us? Is there a presentation ready? Or
no?
Okay.
I only got comments back from you, Ed.
Okay.
So it may be helpful for us to kind of go through, share some thoughts on what you would like in the presentation. And Lee shared a document with everyone that was a list of the objections from the FinCom discussion. I don't know if it's kind of our thought to incorporate any of these or, you know.
I'm thinking we have to answer some of them, Maureen. My approach is to take maybe the highest 4 critiques, which seem to be cost, budget, tax implications, and some prior planning, question about prior planning, and then parking. So if we can do bulleted things about this is what it's going to cost if we do the full project, this is what it costs if we do just the renovation, this is the tax implication in succinct but detail of the 2 different things. So what do we get for spending more? And what's the effect on our tax bill? And then the parking and maybe the prior planning, because I think it's important that the body, the town legislature, understand that we aren't, the history of this, we aren't just bringing this up today. We've had how many people give their input, Maureen? You know, the dozens of programs you've had, how many town meetings we've been to before. So we aren't just dumping this on you right now. This is something the town has approved right up to our last meeting. So that's the structure that I'm thinking of. And I'm happy to listen to anything else other people are thinking of, but I think we obviously have to hit the hardest things full on and explain them better. A lot of people didn't seem to understand the budget. They didn't understand the cost and the variation, you know, the delta between the 2 different scenarios. I know, so that's how I'd like to just sort of start out a framing how other people might like to react. I'll just stop now.
I will add to that a couple of thoughts I had. And I'm finding them now because I don't trust my own memory. Let's see. No, I'm not finding my own email.
while you're doing that, also the safety valve of the contingency.
Mhm.
And then I guess we have to decide, I don't think we decided at our last meeting, do we want to present the scaled down version where we don't have the outside terrace and second floor children's room? Or do you want to stick with our original plan and say, if we're going to do it, we should do it this way? I have some ambivalence about that myself, but I don't think we decided that. Did we, Maureen?
We
At
did
our
not.
last meeting? Yeah. So I guess we have to decide. Maybe that's the biggest thing.
That is, that's
Bill
definitely a
and
key point.
So my recollection of the meeting, the previous meeting that we had, was that Maureen has a limited number of minutes that she has to present. So it's a similar presentation to what she had, responding to some of the things that we came across in a whole bunch of notes from various people, some of which Lee has just spoken about. And try to put those into the presentation, along with John was going to pick up on what really the construction method that we're going at, and how the contingencies and how the estimate is put together, and the fact that it's near a guaranteed max. And he explained himself very well the last time. So that should be part of it. And then Maureen, when she gets to a point that she's at max minutes, then some of the bullets that are left over, all of us be ready to respond to as questions come up about those, or we get up and make, a brief presentation on those bullets, and we can pull them out of the last two meetings that we've had. We've had significant things that we can address, that addresses the public. There was one other thing. I'll come back to it later. That's where I see it at.
Bill, I think your point about the safety valve we have, or the safety mechanisms we have, the contractor at risk, and that we can't really go over budget. I mean, people were saying, oh, this will go over budget. You never know what's going to come in. We really have to explain our safety valves, the contingency, and the CRM's responsibility of coming in on budget. Because they kind of laughed at us when we said, they really actually laughed in the audience. We said, oh, well, we check it at this point, and this point, and this point. They were like, you check it to see if it's gone over? No, it can't go over. So I think that's terribly important.
John has explained it to this committee, and he did at our recent 2 or 3 committees, and he has a very succinct way of doing it. And my understanding was we put together a slide that addresses those, and I'm sure John explained it, and I'm sure he can do it without going through it in detail here. The other comment was, what I heard, and I think they're right, is that we sit up front, the team that we have, both the committee and the representatives from the 3 organizations, we sit up front so that they show that we are a team. John came up on his own afterwards after we talked to them, but they never got to see what I think is important to the public, to show them that we have, like you say, Lee, we've studied this thing for 10 years, and we've had a committee for the recent years, and we were at this point, and we're ready to move forward with it. And Maureen, I'm sure, is able to say that you missed this opportunity in getting the town $9 million to bring the structure forward. We're back in it for anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and we put a Band-Aid on a building, and we really don't know what we get. And I have to be quiet, but that's a summary of things that we've concretely said in the last 2 minutes.
Pete, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I got a couple things. One is thank you to Lee for all her research on Joaquin and the Finance Committee and so forth. I think it creates a foundation for this discussion. One thing I thought of in regard to how to deliver that is maybe we could create an FAQ document where we actually write the questions and the answers and have a handout in the entrance to the meeting. Maybe a front and back of a piece of paper and have about 10 key questions and have well-structured, vetted by this committee so that we make sure it's got the richness and the nuance and so forth that we want. And then, of course, ad hoc comments can be made on top of that, but it creates a foundation of facts that we start from. So that's one idea. Another thing, which isn't an idea, it's a comment about one thing I heard in the town meeting, and it was kind of refuted in our last committee meeting, and I didn't appreciate it. During the town meeting, and that's that there were assertions made that a clean building site would be significantly less expensive. And there was, it implied it was like half as much and stuff, using Littleton as an example. And not knowing anything about Littleton, what their project looked like and stuff, it just was pretty compelling that, in fact, we're spending a lot of money shoehorning it into this site that has bad parking. And then at the meeting last time, I think it was LPA, or it's maybe the Vertex, one of the professionals basically refuted that and so forth. So I think it's important that we address the clean site challenge that was put out last time, that and maybe it is 10% cheaper, but it was implied that it would be dramatically cheaper the way the meeting discussion, the town meeting floor discussion happened. I think that needs to be addressed.
Maureen, you have your hand up?
I just wanted to say Littleton, just for the record, is the building is half the size of ours. So it was definitely going to cost less.
But that wasn't addressed in the meeting, is my point. So we should
No, and
we should
because
make sure we nip those in the bud.
yeah, I didn't have that information like right at
Yep.
hand.
Yep.
And there was another point that I wanted to make, and it slipped my mind, so I'll come back to it.
But I think John also said that he realized if you apply inflation to the Littleton one, it wouldn't be coming in at the comparative pricing they gave.
Right.
Somebody said that at our last meeting. So
I
within that
believe that
whole
was John.
context. Yeah.
Don, I think you had your hand up first.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
thank. Yeah, two quick things that come to mind is from what the reaction is that, with Bill's point too, Bill brought up some excellent talking points, but it's one thing too that we didn't bring up as well is the cost of starting over, not just the cost of renovating an old building, starting, the 18 million, but the cost of starting all over. We've got to start from scratch. And I think Schaub was going to look into the procurement. Can we keep the same committee? Can we keep the same designer team, OPM? Or do we have to go back out again? And that's going to take months and months. And so the cost of materials are going up. But also too is, I've been talking to neighbors as well, asking me, or they've been asking me to comment on, what do you think? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. And when I mentioned about the cost of about 18 million or 20 million to reno, they're like, oh, no. All you need is windows. All you need is, whatever. And there's a lot of pushback to that reno cost. And I said, look, it's going to trigger ADA. It's going to trigger different building code compliances. And it's going to be done in pieces, as I think Bill mentioned. So I think we need to actually get a handle on this is the cost, what it's going to take. And it's going to probably not go out for another year or two because we have to restart from scratch. So those are other points to mention. Well, and I like Pete, I like your point about having a fact sheet passed out when people walk in so they can sit and look at some of that stuff. So you're already engaging their heads and thinking process before the meeting starts.
John.
So just a couple points to add on about the other libraries. I mean, I know that it was referenced in the presentation, by Maureen about the other libraries. We could certainly put get some research and do a slide that shows just cost per square foot and kind of show where we're coming in. We can also you're correct. I had mentioned last time that the Littleton Library was half the size and was bid in 2016 with the numbers from the grant that were submitted the first time. you guys would be in the same situation if you had been invited into the grant 6 years ago, but you weren't. So we can show that, and I can apply, just the average inflation number. People can always say, well, should it be 5% or 4%? Bottom line, whatever it, we can put an estimate to that. We can also tell you what the numbers were from our Medford Library project as well, which was also a first rounder in, which absolutely wouldn't cost what it cost to build when it opened. We opened it about a year ago. So, I guess the question will be, what is the best way to kind of do this? To Maureen's point, we only have 10 minutes, and they used about 9 minutes and 40 seconds of it very effectively last time. So whether it's a slide with numbers with a handout so people can look at it, chew on it a little bit, and then come up with questions is fine. I think that's the TBD when it comes to this, but we can certainly speak to costs in other places for sure.
Maureen?
I did want to share just really quickly. I put together just yesterday a page on our website that's an FAQ. I know it's hard to see on Zoom because it's just the way the formatting is, but I would be happy to take edits and embellishments. This will have to be cut down to make it a two-sided handout, but I needed something to give to the people who are spearheading the petition. They asked for something kind of distilled down with the answers to these specific questions, so that because they're planning to share the petition out in the community. They're not advocating for a vote one way or the other. They're just letting people know that they're petitioning for a special town meeting. So they wanted some information in case people ask them questions, because they're not knowledgeable about the project in the way that we are. So I can email the link to all of you so that, or put it in the chat if that's easier, so that you can look at it up close. It's right at the top of the building project updates webpage. So just wanted you to know it was there.
Thank you. I actually also agree with Pete's idea, but having a printed FAQ, it will. So yeah, I think some of the attendees will have their minds made up, but not all of them. And having a good FAQ out there will be very useful for the people who haven't made up their minds. I've had a couple of thoughts. One of them, just in terms of Bill, with regard to your suggestion about having the project team sitting with us. If I understand the rules of town meeting, they can't do that at the beginning of the meeting, but I imagine that once Maureen goes up and once we start proposing, we can ask them to come up and just sort of be there. Lee, go ahead. You're on mute.
We know that the 10 minutes is a hard and fast rule if it's a special meeting and this is the only thing that's being presented.
I'm not sure of the answer to that, but something that John said to me in passing made me think that it's a rule, or it's the way we do town meeting, but I will reach out to him to find out that information.
Well, it may be the way we do it, but it may not be the rule. And it may be that the town moderator can decide that on his own. It's within his authority. But I think we should question it, given the sort of the gravity of the whole thing, and this, we're not competing with anybody else on an agenda for time, and it may take longer than 10 minutes to do justice for the legislative body. I think that's maybe the way to frame it.
On the other hand, if 10 minutes, I think, is also good practice, because we don't want to bore our audience to tears. That's probably going to happen anyway during the debate, but at least we can let it be driven by other people's questions. I suggested this last week, so and I still like the idea, is have a very condensed 9 or 10 minute presentation and have slides on tap for the objections that we know are going to come up, and then we can bring them up when the time comes. Sean?
I'm gonna leave in a few minutes, go get the kids.
Uh,
Yeah, I just want to add, so on that 10-minute time frame, technically,
Correct.
the town moderator offers that to those in support of the article, as well as
Things
if
done
someone
at 6:30, we're
chooses
usually here
those
about
in
6:45.
opposition to the article. So potentially somebody else could be presenting on the other side.
Could you repeat that, Sean? There was something in the background.
Oh, yes. So, so John Arnold offers, supporters of the article 10 minutes to present. He also offers that same ability to opponents of the article. So somebody else may be choosing to present on the other side. Something to consider.
and of course, if we ask for 15 minutes, they will get however much extra we ask for. They'll get 15 minutes too. So
So theoretically, when this comes up, everybody knows that we're coming back for a second bite of the apple. So theoretically, the finance committee can back out and do a 10-minute presentation as to why this is going to be financially responsible or raise our taxes. I mean, could they come up and be the opposing body?
They can present, they can offer their opinions. I think it would be bad form for them to be the opposing party, but I think anybody else in town, by notifying the town moderator beforehand, could be presented as the opposition to the article. I don't believe the AFC would do that. They may just stand up and provide their thoughts, but I would be surprised if they had an actual presentation.
Sean, if there was someone that came forward to John to say that they wanted to present in opposition, is that something that we would know about ahead of time typically?
I mean, you could ask, we could ask him. I don't know that there would be any issue with, the meeting knowing ahead of time who was presenting in opposition. I do not believe they would be allowed to stand up in the meeting and then request 10 minutes of time to present. They would need to notify John beforehand.
Would we have a chance to rebut, or that's it?
Oh, no, I think there's
The
one
presentation.
present, both sides are presented, and then, anybody can stand up to a microphone and ask a question, right? And so your question could be, Maureen, what do you think of the opposing president,
So I think that the person to get 10 minutes, you definitely would have to tell the moderator ahead of time, and you probably have to have some position of standing, such as a group that is. I don't know that just a random person can do that, but I'm not sure. John Arnold could answer that.
Yeah,
Maureen,
I'm trying
could
to
you
come up with
ask
prior
John that question?
examples.
Thank you.
I will. I do remember there was a group that spoke in favor, I think it was, about the lights when we had the vote for the lights at the
Yes.
football field. And I don't remember if there was an opposition group
There
as well,
was.
but yeah.
Yep, there was.
Bill, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, two things. We pretty much knew from our first meeting here that there was going to be opposition. Steve Woodleary actually said that, and he said it with quite forcefulness. And so I would assume that maybe not Steve's leading it, but certainly there are people out there. Secondly, John, when it came time at the last town meeting for the change in the seal, that committee came up and sat down at the front when their article came up. And I'm referring to something similar to that.
I think that sounds like that would work. Okay. A couple of other points I had. finding them again. Okay. One is that I think it would be important for someone to explain why this meeting happened. In other words, that it's a result of the 200 signatures on a petition rather than something that the library asked for. And further, that 200 signatures on a petition is a state law and not a town bylaw or something the library asked for. We could do that, but it might also want to be something that John Arnold presents as sort of his lead into the meeting. So Maria, if that makes sense to people, I think we can ask him whether he'd like to do it, and if not, we can put that on our plate.
But I also think that the selectmen, when they bring it before their committee to say that they're going to say it, they will say it's based on law of the state, if you will, and I'm quite sure they will. Is that right, Sean?
Okay.
I think that could be on the fact sheet too. And I think you're right. It should be right up front. Why are we here? What happened to get us here?
One of the things I agree. I think a lot of people feel that there's a lot of suspicion out there of our estimates and our assertions that we're going to be on budget and all that. One thing, I may be optimistic about this, but I like to try and get data to do that, to counter that. And the specific data I'm thinking is a history of the town's big projects over the last decade or so, how much they was voted at town meeting and how much they actually cost. I don't know if Maureen, have you gotten a chance to, were you able to look into that? Are those numbers we can actually get?
I'm sure they are. I have not started compiling them. I wanted to hear from the committee first.
That makes total sense. If we had a table, that said, Vale School was 50 million and it came in at 49.7, and I'm totally making up those numbers. Whereas the Forbes building, which was done with a different OPM and not done at CM at risk, was 60 million and came in finally at 65. And again, totally making up those numbers. I think I hope that the data would say if we're working with the CM at risk method and we're working with a high quality project team, we would stay on budget. And that kind of history, particularly history with numbers that are in the town records and the town can support and are not just something that we, the library, are saying, I think that could hold some weight for people.
Yes.
So let me ask the sense of the committee, is it worth Maureen or I or someone going and talking to the appropriate town people and finding out, see if we can dig up those numbers?
Yes. They're there. It's Christie or Leah Talbot could just get them right out of quickly.
Okay.
Maureen, at a time, I'll go with you if you want.
Great.
My recollection was, I think it was Fontaine at our previous meetings, or maybe the one before that, said that they had done X number of projects as contractor at risk, and they had returned, and they had stats of how much money they returned out of their contingency in their previous 5 projects or whatever. Am I imagining that? I recall that.
That is correct.
Right. Yeah.
And that would also be good information. I'd like to get information from the town, because the town government is presumably disinterested in this. But if Fontaine can add that, it can provide that information as well. That would be a great thing.
And Mark Abdullah from Fontaine mentioned that he would be glad to put together something talking about just the basics of CM at risk and over time, the reasons for it, and on average, what it has returned. And I told him I would help him with that too. And I'm thinking, when we did CM at risk for the state legislation back in 2004, it was for a temporary period of time to see how it went. And afterwards, I believe we went back and convened, and the Inspector General of the state for state projects had a summary of the savings and costs. So I can go back to them and find out, in general, not just the town, but for the CM projects and state projects after the first 5 years of CM at risk, what were the savings and how many projects, what were the budget deltas? So I could see if I can find out that too.
I think that would be a good plant in the audience to ask that question. I've just put together a list of what I think may be the first 5 important things to put right up front. Would this be a good time to see if we can
Sure.
organize that? So I think, why are we here, obviously? But then the biggest deal seemed to be the budget. So I'm thinking we need to present the total budget, the cost protections that we have in place, the salmon at risk that you can't have overrun, the tax implications more clearly than they were before, the comparison of money between the renovation and the new and the tax implications of that, and then that we have consultants who've had no overrun. So I think just the issues around the budget, I think those are all the problems that people brought up. Oh, and then the comparisons to other similar projects. If that all went in that beginning budget, because you really got to smash through this, it's too much. It's not too much. It's the best investment we could make. And if we don't do it, we're going to have this cost overrun. We're going to have a budget that we don't even understand yet for renovations. It's just going to escalate. And I think it was the biggest impediment. So I think we really have to focus the majority of that 10 minutes on we aren't screwing you over. This is reasonable for many reasons. Anyway.
Thank you. It's a good list. Maureen,
I'll let John go first and then I'll go.
John.
Oh, thank you. I think the only thing to add to the budget, which it's important to show the budget so people can see it, even if it's in the 5, the simple breakdown, not the budget that was submitted to the MBLC. We're not going to go through 60 separate line items, but the rolled up one. And also, I think the point that was made was that they weren't even given a budget. Well, no, that's not how these projects are done. We need to talk about, we established a program, and then from the program, we drove a square footage, and from the square footage, we got to a budget. That is exactly the same process we did at Fales. It's exactly the same process the town did at Gibbons, at Armstrong, at Hastings. It's really how these jobs are done. So it's, in a perfect world, you would love to know, front end what it is, but what the budget is. But really, if a study hasn't, you do the study first to affect, what your programming needs are. And from there, those needs drive how much space you need, and how much space you need drives how much it's going to cost. And that's how this process goes for projects. So I think it's important for folks to know, use Fales as the most recent one. That's, it's right down the street. That's how that budget was done as well.
All right.
My question was for Sean or Walter. If we're going to be doing presentations for the select board and AFC before a special town meeting, do you know if they're gonna?
I don't know if you'd want to. We would meet to discuss it again. So if there's new information, then that would make sense. But that's up to probably Mike, or it's up to the entire AFC to decide usually who we want. But generally, anybody that wants to come to talk to us is usually welcome.
Lee?
I think that's the most polite politically thing to do. And we always go to those boards before we do a presentation. So I think we should with this as well. It might garner more support from the Board of Selectmen. They supported us before, but they didn't speak up. The AFC will do what they want with the presentation, and maybe it will make some of them think about it a little more differently. I don't know. I don't think there's a downside. I think there's a definite positive side to respecting their role and presenting to them ahead of time, so they don't feel like we're surprising them.
I agree. Just out of courtesy, we need to offer to present, and then of course it's up to those committees to decide whether they want us.
Yeah, if that's the case, once we leave this meeting here, and when we get something from the selectmen that yes, there is in fact going to be a town meeting. Let's put a timeline together on when we gotta have certain information ready to go to these, and it has to be succinct. It's the same thing that we're gonna take to the town meeting. So,
Yes.
put a timeline to make sure that we can make these things. Last two meetings, we're still getting input, if you will. We need to
Mhm.
solidify it so that we can move ahead.
Which means, among other things, we'll need to understand when the relevant select board and AFC meetings are, or when they might come in relation to the special town meeting, assuming that happens. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
So
thank
there's
you,
a
Bill.
select board meeting Wednesday night, and then I think the next one's probably about 2 weeks later.
I think Sean told us it was 11/22.
Okay, and the
Last week.
22nd on that Tuesday. AFC doesn't schedule, has no scheduled meetings at the moment. If at this current select board meeting Wednesday, it was going to go forward, we would have a meeting probably the following week. Usually Monday or Thursday, but I don't know that the signature people will be ready in time for Wednesday. That seems kind of optimistic. So I suspect that means that they would be talking on the 22nd. And so that
I think actually, Walter, I think I know they won't be ready for tomorrow, but
they might have a special meeting.
yeah, that was what I heard from town hall, is that that's probably what they would do. And rather than wait until the 22nd, they would just have a very short meeting.
Yeah, it helps everybody to know a chosen date sooner than later.
Yeah.
Do we
Especially
have any,
with the holidays and Thanksgiving and all this other stuff coming on.
Right.
do we have an anticipated date for the 200 signatures?
The organizers told me they're hoping to have all of them by Wednesday of next week. And I don't think it's going to take them until Wednesday, but they're just giving themselves a goal.
Mhm.
What happens with that? How does that, do they bring it to the town hall and give it to the clerk, and then that triggers an automatic request?
No, I mean, they're going to need more than 200 signatures because you need 200 approved signatures of voters. So that it would have to be probably gone through by the town clerk.
Right.
So you usually show up with extras. So in case any of your question, you're not done.
Let's say they have 400, they present it to the town clerk, let's say next Wednesday. So what happens then? Does that trigger automatically? Okay, this means there's going to be a special town meeting, or the Board of Selectmen have to discuss that first? Or how does that, is it an automatic process?
It's automatic that there will be one. The date is selected by the Board of
My
Selectmen.
understanding is that the state law requires the Board of Selectmen to schedule a meeting within 45 days of, I guess, when they get the approved official notice.
Okay, and that keeps us within the, January 6th or January 9th timeline for the library commission, the library funding?
Yes.
Okay.
I would assume that the select board, since they were in favor of this project before, they would at least make that town meeting before January 9th or whatever it is, even if it was only 30 days away. But yeah.
Would, is it expected or requested that it be on a Saturday morning?
That's what the petition organizers are going to ask, is my understanding. It's up to the select board to decide when. So, and I know they've already done some investigating to find out when auditoriums are available and clickers and the whole works. So.
Yeah, that's sort of the tricky part, is usually the scheduling of the electronic voting has to be done in advance. And so that may or may not be possible depending how quickly.
Al?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what about the vote from the planning board with their article for the zoning?
I talked to Jim Robbins yesterday, and he said he'll run it by them, but he doesn't expect, I mean, they voted unanimously to support the zoning article the last time. He doesn't have any reason to believe they would change their mind about that. And he was going to also check with town council and make sure that they don't need to hold another public hearing on that article because typically zoning articles require a public hearing. Since it was passed over, no action was taken on that article. He thinks that they have to hold the public hearing within 6 months of the date of that it's voted. So we would still be within that 6-month window. But he's double checking on everything with town council just to make sure that we don't run into any issues with that.
Right, so the special town meeting would be for the article for the library, but they won't be bringing up the planning board's article at the same meeting?
They will be, yes,
Well, they will be,
Need
yes,
both.
yes, because we need both to
right,
Mhm.
make the
exactly.
project happen, yeah.
I know John Arnold was very particular about the petition needs to have the right wording, which would definitely mean it needs to include both of those articles. So, okay. Any other thoughts at this point? I have some. I'm just asking to make sure I'm not stepping on anybody else's toes. But
Let's listen to yours.
okay. I think we need to put some more depth into the base repair scenario. And in particular, I think we need to explain more about what's meant by triggering all the various upgrades. And my understanding, I'm going to take a step sideways. I looked at this. If you go over a third of the assessed cost of the building, then all those upgrades get triggered. And the assessed cost of the library at this, as of a week or two ago, was about $1 million. So we would do that just with the windows, let alone any of the other repairs. I'm not sure whether but I'd really like to get, as I said, as I've mentioned, Maureen, the building inspector in to explain to us or something exactly how that's going to work and whether, our assumptions that it is in fact going to trigger an issue are correct from the building inspector's viewpoint, because that's where that ultimate decision is going to be made. Again, just to hopefully allay some suspicions that this is a made up number, which it isn't, but we need to demonstrate that to the group. And I actually don't know that we asserted it pretty strongly, but we didn't put a whole lot of data backing that up at the town meeting. John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I don't think the public understands the implications of the cost of doing that at all. And that's why I mentioned in our beginning slide about the total, going through all the budget issues, that we need to show the tax implication of both scenarios as much as we can, not knowing the total cost of just a repair. But we know there's escalation over a couple of years of trying to figure that out. And I think we can come up with a good comparison. Remember we said the delta, if you spend this much more, this is what you get. That's so important to be able to show.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think absolutely. I mean, I think that what we talked about last is, we have that list of items that had costs in it from when LPA first got involved. And that's the list that has been escalated. What I want to be clear on is that this other option was not studied to the degree that this project was. So we're never going to have an apple to an apple. We're just not, because the vote was taken years ago to pursue a grant with the MBLC. All of the review, and this goes to kind of the comment earlier about the story, the history of how we got here. Why is it downtown? Well, it was looked at way back that downtown would be where, that's the location it's going to be. Is it going to be a renovation addition? That was looked at. So when this application went in, a lot of those decisions were made years ago when town meeting voted to submit that application to MBLC. So at the end of the day, we are trying to answer a question about, well, what if we don't do it? Well, it's already been mentioned a couple of ways. The process that has led us to this pretty detailed cost estimate for SD has not taken place for the other option, because that wasn't the direction of the committee. So we're going to give you, as good a number as we can, but understand that it hasn't been specified. It hasn't been designed. We don't know exactly what it would entail, but we're taking our combined educated attempts at putting that number together. So there was that number, then that number got escalated up, and that's the, that's the discussion piece. And I think it's a great point to try to discuss the implications with the building inspector, and if he wants to chime in on that, for sure. And it's easy to figure out what the, like you said, Ed, you've got the value of the building.
Mhm.
It's easy to spend 30% of that value. I mean, we can, we LPA, somebody can speak to that. And that's, again, that issue has been encountered kind of on all public projects. You face that issue. Towns historically value their buildings low, so it puts them into that position all the time. So it's an unfortunate, kind of issue of doing that.
Thank you. I should say I'm totally aware that that we don't have the level of detail in that current estimate, and I don't think we have either the time or the funding to get the level of detail we would need to equal the quality of the estimate for the renovation. But whatever we can do within the time and funding limits, I think we should do. Bill.
Yeah, two things. One, I think, Maureen, you could summarize something and put it in the sheet that Pete was talking about, the fact sheet of what has been done and how we arrived at just some bullets, and it would bring people's attention to that. Secondly, the building commissioner did at the last town meeting get up in request for the Hastings School, explained why it would trigger and he was very succinct on it, why it would trigger more money. It was in a different context, but he was very good at it. So he could do that. It's outside. John, it's good that you could do it, but it's outside supporting what this is all about.
Pete, you're up next.
Yeah, I had one question on the Plan B, the Band-Aid project, whatever we're going to call that alternative. Would all of that be paid out of like free cash? I mean, that wouldn't be paid through a bond. So there's a whole question of what that means on the tax rate. If it's all paid, $500,000 for windows, $500,000 for roof, and that comes in every year, or is that going to be a capitalized project? Does anybody have a sense of, if we're trying to compare the two, one of it is the aggregate number, the other is on a cash flow basis?
That's a very good
I
point.
think the project would be far more than the numbers you're talking about. So I think there would be likely to be some borrowing on some of the items.
If it seems to me, and I'm going to ask the construction professionals to correct me if I'm wrong, if we could do it as a piecemeal series of repairs, do the roof, like you said, do the windows this year, do the roof next year, do the elevator the year after that, we might be able to take it out of free cash. That's a discussion we'd have to have with the finance committee, and also with that we need to know, among other things, what each of those stages was going to cost. My concern is at some point there, if when we trigger ADA, we're going to be jackhammering we're going to have to make room for a bigger elevator. As I'm going from my understanding from what LPA has told us, and I may be wrong about this, LPA. If I screw it up, let me know. We'd have to redo the ramp to the lower level. So that's, we're demolishing that lower section to some extent. At some point, we're going to need to put in a sprinkler system. That's a whole, that's going to shut the building down and tear out all the ceilings and floors and so on. There's the possibility that we might need more structural steel in there to meet current standards. And if we start tearing into the structure of the building, then it's not a piecemeal thing anymore. And I think we would need loans for that. So sort of the question is, could we get by with just repairing things one at a time versus having to, sooner or later, that's going to get us into one big project. It seems to me if we're inevitably going to have a big project, we might as well start that way rather than sort of piecemeal up to it. So
I
I'll be
guess
quiet and ask for comments now.
that was kind of my point. If it's going to be another 20 million, 18 million, whatever the number is, bond, and shut down the library for a year while then you got to get a replacement library and stuff. I think telling that story is part of putting the meat on the bones of the alternative.
I think telling that story is more important than attaching specific dollar values to it. I mean, if to take the most expensive situation, if we had to redo all the structural steel, I don't think not many people look at that and say, oh, that's a trivial expense. People will get that. So I interrupted whoever wanted to talk next. So
I was going to say, by doing it piecemeal, you're doing it with entirely different project teams. You're having to bid out different contractors who aren't part of the process from the beginning. It's all going to be piecemeal. Every year, a new contractor, a new set of subcontractors that weren't part of this whole project. It's one off, one off, one offs. And it'd be totally inefficient. And I think the costs are just going to go up.
Lee? You're still on mute, ma'am.
Very important.
There we go.
Point. Yeah,
Thank
very
you.
important point. We need to include that in the scenario of what if we just do the reconstruction. When you were talking about the town meeting vote to submit to MBLC, John, I think we need to have a bullet for that saying the date and how many people voted at that town meeting. Like, remember, your legislative body put us in this motion. It isn't the library building committee that pushed us in this motion. The town legislature did it. Just a quick factual bullet as part of that history.
So this is back on the previous town meeting votes for the earlier stages in the funding. Okay. Brian, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Bob was saying. You know, if indeed we were able to stretch this out and do it piecemeal, I will have to look into, you know, whether if there are time restrictions on whether or not you can do little bits at a time without triggering certain things. But to add to Bob's point, that you'll be looking at different project teams, but also putting out separate bid packages for procurement wise, which is going to put a lot of stress and added design fees on that. And those procurement processes, depending on the amount of money that this segmented project is, can also go through pre-qualification and can also go through other types of procurement that can stretch out for 6 weeks to 2 months just in order to get a contractor on board. So I just wanted to share that, you know, Bob's point is very valid in that it's not so much segmenting, but it could also stretch out for a very long time.
I think it's a question we need to answer for the town is whether we could do it in a segmented way. And if we could get away with, they're thinking of a renovation as changing the carpets and, you know, putting in a new lighting system, doing like piecemealing it. And if we weren't going to trigger all of the various compliance issues, I think financially that might, despite the bumps in the road that we would see because we're doing it at one contract at a time, that might be the less costly way to do it. But it wouldn't be as big a project. I see, but there's the big if: can we do it that way? And we have all these triggered issues.
From the experience with the schools, they look backwards some number of years at the cost, and you accumulate. And just like what's going on at Hastings, if you want to stretch this out over 30 years, maybe, but you know, there's an ethical dilemma of not wanting to support ADA to me.
Yeah, that's a whole different, I agree.
I think that we certainly should not be opponents of that.
No, you know, when I was 20, I would have said, why do that? But now I've realized everybody is disabled at some point, just about everybody. So that's, anyway, Bob.
Sure, I want to go back to maybe what John was summarizing about 10 minutes ago, and we talked about the cost estimate for option 2 was never designed or planned for, and that You know, we did this in 2012, and the town voted in 2016 to go ahead with the option we're going for to get the $9.4 million funding. So we're going back to the cost of base repairs again, going back to that. Again, I want to hit home that option, the option 2 of having to address, that we talked about the time delays and the cost of time delays. We're still talking too, don't we have to go back out if we're going to do option 2 that we really never prepped for and bid the whole thing out again, get a whole new procurement for a whole new design team, OPM team. We have to start all over again with that. So that's going to take another year or two, and costs are just going to be skyrocketing for that. So I think that has to be included in the fact that we're going to have to start all over again.
What I say about that, Bob, is that we would lose all the work that our project team has done up to this point. The $250,000 that we've spent up to this point to get to this point will be lost, and we'll just be scrapping it and starting over.
You said it better than me.
So I would, but I guess, the question I was just raising, and I guess I'm doing a little bit of devil's advocate there. I think that's the sort of concept I think we need to take to the building inspector. If we did this, what would we need to do? And if he goes down and says ADA, which he will, and sprinkler system, which he will, and I don't know what there's other things, maybe structural or whatever else is on his list, then we have, that's a pretty strong statement to say, yeah, we have to do this in one big project as opposed to piecemeal. Yeah, okay. Any other, Maureen, do you want to reach out to the building inspector? Would you
Sure.
like me to? Okay,
No,
great,
I
thank
will.
you.
Yep.
I don't want to shovel everything on top of you
No, it's fine.
unless you want it. So,
Yep.
Lee, you've got your hand up. Lee, you're on mute.
There's a sound, somebody talking. So are we going to talk about whether we want to do the altered design that takes the $1.5 million off of the project? Or do we want to continue to push through with our original design? How do we want to think about that?
That's a very good question. I'm going to comment here, and then I'll sort of let other people go. It seems to me that as far as our presentation, it doesn't much matter except we'll have to have a slide saying we have taken a look and gone back to this. The big question is going to be, and the petition, I assume that text is going to have been submitted pretty soon. I would hope so if they're going to get it done by next week. So that's going to be locked in, presumably, I assume at the original cost estimate. So what we're asking is whether we want to either offer an amendment or change the article on the floor.
Ed, all we would have to do is in the motion,
change the motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
the motion would be for a different amount.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop. Steve, you got a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I joined late, so sorry if this comment isn't appropriate. So in terms of the segmenting, the code is very clear about what numbers you can spend and over what periods of time. So certainly an LPA, I'm sure could write that up. I know I've referenced it. It's just been a number of years before I had that issue before me, so I don't remember exactly how it's set up. But certainly the building inspector can confirm it, but that's what he would be doing, is just reading exactly what the building code requires. So it isn't a matter of what he would require, it's what the building code states. So that's very clear. So I just wanted to add that to this if it had not already been said. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's not a matter of him saying it, is getting his word behind it for the town so that it's not us saying it. John.
Thank you. And the only other thing I'll add is LPA, when LPA and as you know, we met last week, LPA, Fontaine, and Vertex, to kind of go through the existing budget, to kind of look at what we could do. We talked about, being able to reduce that number. The to-do that was left with LPA was to revise the floor plans showing a reduced square footage. And so that we could show that information to MBLC, because if that's the will of the committee to move ahead with a reduced footprint or a reduced floor plan and a reduced budget, we want to make sure that we can answer the voters and say, yes, this change does not impact the grant. You know, obviously, if we're taking, you know, I was texting with Tony, you know, it's closer to 2,000 square feet out of the project. And if that's the case, you know, are we still going to, you know, would Westborough still get the 9.4 million? I mean, we were confident the answer would be yes, but we wanted to have that information so we could get the MBLC's approval.
Do you need a vote from the building committee or just an informal opinion?
That absolutely.
I'm sorry, Ed, say that one more time.
Do you need us to do a formal vote or just a sort of consensus? I'm happy to do it either way, but
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I think we should take that info and send it to MBLC, you know, with Maureen, and just say, hey, this, you know, as a result of feedback, you know, from the town, as you know, the initial vote, we're looking at, you know, we looked at ways to try to save some costs, and you know, we've made some design changes. We want to, you know, taken some square footage out of the program that was related largely to the exterior indoor outdoor spaces. You know, would this revised floor plan still meet, you know, in your opinion, meet all the requirements of the grant? And we would like to get that obviously in writing from them, so that if anybody asks us at town meeting, you know, I mean, right out of the bat, but to me, this is one of the big things. If we're doing this, we say, hey, in reaction to what we heard, we did this, we've reduced the budget, and we've gotten the MBLC's blessing on it. Like, that's, like, to me, that's, you know, that's in the first page.
right. So I guess the question is, so there's two ways this could come up, I think. One is we alter the motion, and the other is somebody could make an amendment.
I think if
we want to do it, we should just move it that way.
So to Maureen's point, what I'm concerned about is the timing. Okay, this petition comes in, and if it comes in with the full number, fine, put it in with the full number, and we can change it on town meeting. What we don't want to do is rush, you know, because we might not hear from MBLC for 10 days. You know what I mean? And then when we hear from them, then the project team will get back together, make sure the numbers are solid, represent them to you guys, say, hey, here's what's going to happen to the numbers. You're good with it? We're going to go with these. So we have a set of numbers that for the project that was submitted and was voted down. But if we're altering it, we won't have it in time before before next Wednesday, probably. You know, like as Maureen said, if that's when that's when it's coming in and that's when it goes to the select board, we're going to be chasing it a little bit. So we'd rather it be right and do it by amendment than try to get the language into, and that way we're not messing with either of those articles. The petition, you know, however the petitioners are working it, you know, don't add another variable. If we need to change the value, my understanding is that's probably the easiest thing we can do at town meeting.
Bob?
That was what I was confused about. So we have, because I know last week we talked about we wouldn't go back to the town unless we had a significant change in cost or scope. But then we talked about the fact there's going to be, you know, petition with at least 200, maybe 300, 400 signatures going back for the exact same project we wanted. But are we going back and also having a side piece in the back pocket to have a reduced piece? And if we come back up with that, bringing it up, are we blindsiding the petitioners? I mean, do we need to be, are they going forward thinking that we are going to be coming back with a reduced scope that they don't know about? I mean, that's what I'm confused about.
I know the people organizing the petition drive were on the call last week when we discussed this option. So they at least are aware of the possibility. And I don't think they can claim to be blindsided. I'm switching over to my own opinion here. I think they would be almost as happy with the downsized version than the full version. and much, much happier with either of them than with not renovating at all.
And they couldn't wait for us to come up with a
Correct,
number
yeah.
or make a decision. They needed to get the petition launched. So they launched it with the two articles exactly word for word, the way they were on the warrant on October 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Lee,
Yeah, I think we have to figure out what we believe. We had a group of people there who said this is too much money. That was the basic reason it seemed to have gotten voted down. If we take off 1.5 million and say, you know, we heard you, we've done the best we could. You asked if it could be reduced. We could reduce it by 1.5. We could show the impact on taxes, which would be minor to have that change. Or do we think that they were so entrenched in their ideas that it doesn't make any difference if we say, look, we've acquiesced, we're taking out 1.5, we heard you. Is it more important to keep the structural design that we made because that's the best program that we could have? I'm just not sure how we're reading our people. Are we going to get more votes because we say we took off 1.5? If it only makes 17 cents difference on your taxes, I'm not sure how to think this through on how effective that strategy would be. And do we want to dump something that's beautifully designed and organized, thinking that might help a few voters say yes?
But you only lost by a few voters.
Yeah.
yeah, a few voters might be enough to
Right.
change that outcome.
But I think, I mean, we don't have to decide today because we're going to put this in, you know, it's going at the full budget. Between now and when it gets on the floor, I think we do have to have, you know, information on a slide to say, if we changed this and took out $1.5 million, this is what it would do to taxes. You know, we're willing to put this as an amendment on the table and know what it would really be. We don't
Well,
have to decide today.
I think Katie has some revised drawings that she could share that might help us to understand kind of what that would mean.
Oh, that would be good.
Katie, do you want to comment? You took yourself off mute.
I did on the no build option. I just wanted to clarify the scope that everybody's been talking about seems accurate, with the exception of changing all of the structural steel. The steel changes would be selective relative to what the code would require. We wouldn't be going in there as far as that goes. So I just wanted to get that on the table before it hit the streets.
So changing some of the steel, structural steel, maybe depending on
there
what
are
was needed.
selective pieces in the code. For example, if you have a parapet, or there are certain areas, obviously with the elevator enlargement, certain areas where we would have to do that, but we have to have adequate support for the systems. For example, if we put in fire suppression, we have to show that we have adequate support. But that's a catch-22. We would not typically replace all the structural steel to support something. It then becomes not a very cost-effective process. So
right.
Just wanted to clarify that piece.
Thank you. I love when people clarify my misconceptions because it minimizes my time being wrong. So, Pete.
I'm speaking out to say I'm in favor of the lower cost, reducing it by as much as we can within the terms of the grant. I think it shows that we heard the community and the concerns that were raised. And I think it's prudent, and it's kind of hard to measure exactly in votes, but I think it conveys the right message and the right posture to go back to town meeting with a lower cost project.
Any other building committee members want to weigh in on that? I actually
agree with Kate. I agree. I think that's probably a prudent move politically.
I agree. It's just showing a good faith effort to take some costs out would be helpful.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay.
Sorry. I think the project was designed perfectly to meet the building program, and I don't think people are coming to town meeting expecting to see a different project and hear an explanation about a different project. They're coming to vote on that project.
Good point.
That's also true. Yep.
Yeah.
I would point out also that anybody can offer an amendment. So somebody who was not necessarily on this committee but wanted to reduce costs could offer an amendment to reduce the amount by whatever, the $1.5 million or whatever it turns out to actually be. And then we'd have to think about whether to support that as well. Let me say, okay, so we've gotten some opinions. It seems to me that it's clearly worth finding out from the MBLC whether they would okay this level of change.
Yeah.
Because if they want, that sort of answers all of our questions right there.
May I?
Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be prepared to be able to discuss this at the town meeting and to offer it. But I think the people that thought it cost too much aren't going to be swayed by $1.5 million.
I agree.
Less.
But
I think they're entrenched in their idea. It's bad timing. We don't want to spend this money. For whatever reason, they're thinking that. And I think if we showed what the impact on the tax dollar would be of saving 1.5, I don't think it's going to be a game changer. It can't be that much money, 1.5 off.
It's be, I think, $14 or $15 for a year for the average household.
Yeah, it's going to be insignificant. So it's not like the trade-off, an important part of the building, a lovely part of the building for the future, which we'll never be able to replicate later. If we turn it down, we just will never have it. For that small a gain, I think that would show maybe how misplaced some people's priorities are.
Did I see another hand go up a second ago?
Yeah, that was me. And I was just gonna add to Maureen, if the decision was to go with the lesser programming, I think that the wording and the message of that is really important to say that you're sacrificing programming and not cutting fat. Because if that message comes out that fat's being cut, then the questions could arise from there as to what else can be cut from this.
So I would suggest that we let LPA kind of show what's out there so folks can get it, because my understanding is that the changes, when the program was invited in, there were some suggestions from MBLC about the indoor-outdoor space. That kind of led to the porch and that in the upstairs space. The program was already established. So just to be clear, this is stuff that was included, but we wouldn't be cutting. We'd be cutting within the allowable program square footage. We're not cutting. They asked us to add something. LPA added it, baked it into the design, and now we're essentially taking that back out of the design again. So if I correct me if I'm wrong, Katie and Tony, if I have that right about what the change was for MBLC. And now the change is this essentially a change back or more than a change back?
Sure. I mean, it probably would help if we did show you the plans when you're ready. We could use that as a benchmark for our discussion. Technically, as I understand it, MBLC's grant is around the square footages within the building, Maureen, and the indoor-outdoor aspect of it is not a grant requirement per se.
Right.
I don't want to misspeak on that,
No,
but
right.
it was a desirable feature that everybody recognized as a benefit to the project.
Walter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I did well, if I had an envelope, it'd be back of envelope, but calculation on what people were asking. And 1.5 million out of 36.7 is about 4%. And the estimate of the borrowing cost per year to the average single family home was $245, so say 250. So that comes out to about $10 per year for 20 years. So 200 over the life and $10 per year to the average single family home, to
Good job.
give you a context.
Okay.
And hope,
Thank you.
I think that's right.
So let me take a step back. What do we think about asking our project team in Marine to present the lower cost idea to MBLC? Because that's the starting point for everything else we need to do.
I think we should ask them.
I'm in favor.
Okay, Marine or project team, would you like a vote on that? Or can we just,
I don't think we need a vote on that.
okay,
I
Then-
think more information's good.
yeah. I'll let
And if
you-
they come
yeah.
back and say no, that certainly slants it one way completely. And we have that information for town meeting. And
Yep.
if they say it's possible, and then we at least know our boundaries.
I'd like to acknowledge a conversation that's been going on in the chat. One of our members of the public asked us to include the expected interest rate and interest expense in the total cost of the budget. And that I was actually thinking along the same lines, that we should have one or two slides, one with sort of the assumptions behind the budget estimate, and the other one with a graph showing the budget in the payment, the impact on the budget of the payments over the course of 20 years or whatever. And I've seen things like that in previous town meeting presentations. I didn't think we said last year, but projections of how particular capital projects would affect the town's overall debt burden. I think something like that would answer questions and or at least get what we believe to be the best available information on the table, as opposed to some of the interesting speculations we've seen over the course of the time. So having acknowledged that and made my suggestion, Lee, what's your thought?
I don't think we've ever included what the interest impact is on a town article.
We never have.
No.
It would not be part of the article because they're not voting that.
Right, but even part of the discussion, I think we need to stop that part of the discussion. We have never included that before. It's prejudicial, it's unfair, it's not what we do. There's always an interest implication. We have a great rating. Our town, our interest rates are competitive, very competitive. We got AAA status. It's not one of the most relevant points. And I think people are just bringing it up again to try and wreck the whole idea. Oh, well, it's going to cost a lot more. We don't know how much escalation is going to be. We don't know how much, construction costs are going to go up. We don't know how much the interest is going to go up. Interest rates go up and down. It's irrelevant to the article. We never have that be a relevant piece. And I don't think we should add it now.
Walter.
Well, there's a lot of things we always used to do that we don't always still do, and there's a good reason for it too. I mean, now on every article and every new item that gets added, they talk about the effect to the average family home. So you get a concept of we're spending $100,000 on a attachment for the DPW. That's $4.07 or whatever. And so I think you're going to see this going forward. I think throwing out huge numbers that's how much the article is wrong. But I thought the estimate that Leah did was perfectly rational, that it will cost about $245 on average per year, including a guess at the interest rates. Because I think that's a fair number to know, because to us, what's $36 million? I don't know. It's really what happens to your bill. And I think everybody has a guess at how their house fits relative to the average family value, kind of. And so, and so that's where I think there is more tendency now to try and be more and more transparent of the effect on taxes. So the timing, like you said, first time ever, But we tried to do it for we did it for the wastewater treatment article as well. And I'm sure we'll do it for all capital articles in the spring.
I think the part that Leah did with projecting the single family tax rate, I think that's perfect. And I think that's helpful as a resident and a taxpayer. I think that taking the $12 million cost of interest over the life of this loan and saying that this project is now a $50 million project is inaccurate and it's misleading. And I don't think that that belongs in the presentation, because I liken that to like when you buy a car or when you buy your house, you know how much the interest rate is, you know how much your payment is going to be, and your concern is only, am I going to be able to pay this bill off? I don't know anybody, maybe somebody in the room right now does this, but I don't go to the bottom line of my mortgage or my car loan and say, oh my God, at the end of the day, I'm going to pay, $80,000 for this vehicle. Like, what are you talking about? And then start fighting with the finance manager. That's not a good way to look at anything that is financed. But I think what you're saying, Walter, is I think that is reasonable. And I think that would give people a really good understanding of what the impact is on their own situation, and then help them be able to make a good decision on this.
I think well stated, Maureen.
Steve, we're outside the public forum, but please, this is an issue I know is important to you. Please let us have your comments.
Thank you. I think with inflation, what its impact on people's own family household budgets, and what it's going to have an impact on future town spending, I think it's reasonable that people want to know how much it's going to cost, including the interest going forward. Now, maybe you don't put it in terms of the total cost of the project, but certainly including the interest in the yearly impact to their tax bill is reasonable, and people are looking at their own budgets with this level of detail. And I think it's reasonable that they would also want to look at it for especially the larger projects that the town is going to do.
And the 245 did include that.
Yes, it did.
So we've done that.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. As long as that was made clear, I didn't realize the 245 included that.
Oh yeah. Walter, I believe the finance committee's guide, I forget the title of it, actually included the total, the cost of the principal and interest for the whole project in sort of the introductory statement somewhere.
Yes, it discussed the it did both what Maureen liked and what Maureen didn't like.
Okay.
So the numbers that were reported on the averages do include interest and principal. The attempt to try and call it a bigger project just, I think, adds confusion myself, because it's not the amount you're borrowing. You're borrowing this amount.
Exactly.
Right. I will say, Maureen, to your earlier point, I do in fact think about the total cost of things, but that's not the sticker price. You buy, if you buy a house, you're not paying the sticker price plus all the interest. You have to think about it, but at least I feel like I have to. But yeah, we need to make sure it's clear which numbers are what. Okay. Maureen, would it be worthwhile to ask the finance manager to get a more complete thing? I've been
I think
thinking
we
about
already
this.
Sorry, Ed, I
Well, we
think
have the,
we
let me
have
take a step
the
sideways.
numbers from her already. That's unless we're going to change the number at the
I
top.
have, I guess what I'm thinking is I have a way to, I have thoughts about how to make a presentation, make that more of a presentation. So maybe I'll do that. The thing is, if I do it, that's one thing. If the finance manager does that, that's a much more
Well,
credible thing.
What I suggest you do is do it and bring it to her.
Okay.
We passed the book you were talking about, the recommendations book, report and recommendations book. We bring to her because she checks all the numbers.
Okay.
And
Yep.
she's very good at that.
Okay. So I will put on my plate, drafting a couple of slides around that point, and then Maureen, I'll send them to you, and you can take a look and show them to Leah once we're happy with them.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments or suggestions in terms of what kinds of things we need to cover, what objections we want to be ready for, and just our general strategy for the meeting, assume when it occurs?
Well, I think, I offered some bullets that I think should be included in the budget presentation or the money presentation. Maybe it'd be helpful after this meeting or by the end of this meeting if we all just said, yes, we think these are the bullets that should be fleshed out, or do we feel comfortable enough with that? And then we didn't talk about parking. I think we can easily have, because that was a big issue, I think we can easily have one slide that shows you either have 75 parking spaces, or if you want to walk 2 blocks, you got 104 parking spaces. And some comment about, without sounding dismissive, but very few public libraries are in places where people don't have to walk a block or 2. I mean, that's not a burden to put on people. And I think we just deal with it neatly, factually, and hopefully people be embarrassed to complain, oh, I have to walk 2 blocks.
Yeah,
But
not
we do need to
everyone's going to
address
be
that.
there at the same time.
Right, exactly. And then we want the prior planning slides, and we talked a little bit about what should be in that. And I think it's very important to show how many people over time have been engaged, how many meetings there were, how many people attended, and that can all go on one slide. But it's very important to talk about the town meeting where we voted to submit this to MBLC, the date and the number of people that were there for that. So, I mean, you, town meeting, got this emotion, not us. We were doing what you asked us to do. What we want to have on the fact. Now, we haven't really gone through what we want on the fact handout, but a lot of it would be what's in the slides, and it may be more as background. So we need to flesh that out. So maybe one way to do this is for all of us to send our notes to Maureen, and then a couple people I wouldn't mind volunteering to sit down with Maureen and say, let's clean this up, put it all together, and send it back. These are what we think need to be on the slides. Would that be helpful to you, Maureen?
Sure.
Okay. So, so the plan is everybody sends suggestions to Maureen, and Maureen, you will, I'm gonna say, have something ready to discuss at the building committee's next meeting. We'll have to decide when that is. Okay. I'm just thinking in terms of the timeline that Bill suggested. Yeah, but pardon me. But I think that's probably where we should leave action items at this point. Because right now, if we don't do that, we'll be suggesting the same things over and over. And I think we're at a point where we need to actually see it and be able to talk about it. Okay. Let me see. I have to check the agenda.
Other committee issues. I did meet with the Sikh temple and the Hindu temple. Oh, the Hindu temple folks and the Sikh temple I've been communicating with. I went to 2 meetings or 2 celebrations, and each one they said I'd be able to speak or do something for a few minutes. And then it became very clear to the people that were helping me and the people there that it just wasn't going to work. The first Diwali celebration had probably at least 1,000 people there, very happy, running around. You know, it's just they weren't ready to have somebody talk to them. And then the meeting later that day, which was a smaller group of residents, was also just so celebratory that the fellow who was going to help me said they'd had to turn down Kate Donahue and some representatives, so they didn't feel that they could allow me to speak. And I realized it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. However, we did get to distribute 50 of the flyers. And I'm going to work with both congregations. They don't mind using that word for the members of their temples to see if I can have a space for Maureen to come and do the type of presentation that she did for other groups around town. These are very invested people in our community, and somehow we really haven't gotten them. It's not just us in the library committee. We haven't gotten them invited and feeling welcome about being involved, I guess. I don't know. So we've got some work to do, but I think we'll pay off. And I'm totally willing to continue to try and make that presentation work for both groups of people.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments from committee members? Okay, let's see. This is something for Katie. At some point, have you? Somebody mentioned that you might already have drawings of is that the case, or?
We do.
Okay.
We had just forwarded them to Maureen yesterday, but she's
Okay.
given us the A-OK to show them to you if you're interested.
I think we can wait until we hear from the MBLC before we take time on it. It's just I wanted to know whether those would be ready if the MBLC gave their okay. But Maureen, or Katie, if you'd like to show it, I will step back from that.
We're here to serve you, whatever works for
Okay.
you.
So I guess I guess I'm asking Maureen that question.
Let's run it by MBLC before we
Okay.
take any more time on it, and then we'll bring it back to the group.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns? So the next, and I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to raise the next point, which is when should we meet again? And I guess
Next
one
week.
limiting factor there, Maureen, how long do you think it'll take you to put something together for us to look at?
I
think-
will put it together on the timeline of our next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
Whenever
I
we
think-
decide we're going to meet,
I
I can get it done.
Okay.
And I'm perfectly willing. I'm free to help you in that time period, Maureen.
Thank you.
So I heard someone say next week. I think I did. Would
I
that
did.
does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, we can't waste any time. We really need to keep up our schedule, keep
Okay,
up our
that's-
efforts.
That makes sense to me. Shall we say same time, same day next week? So Tuesday, the 8th at 3:30 to 5 or so?
Mhm. It's my birthday.
Oh, I'll bring a cake and then I'll eat it in front of you on Zoom.
It's
You know, a
election
little
day, too.
candle.
Oh, that's true. It is election day. Will that be an issue for anyone?
Not a problem.
I'm working, so I won't be able to attend. I'm sure you'll miss me.
I have a conflict also, but you can meet without me.
Would another day also work, or do we want to just stick with Tuesdays? I'm hearing no other suggestions, so I think we should just go with Tuesday, the 8th at 3:30, probably running until 5.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Okay,
Maureen, you'll
yes.
post that and send out the agenda and all. Great, thank you.
Yep. I'll post it and send out the Zoom.
Okay. Anything else we need to discuss? I guess I need a motion to adjourn.
I
Oh, I
moved to
moved.
adjourn.
Second,
Second.
Emery.
There's a second. Okay, gone through. Maureen,
Amy Hot, yes.
Ed Baldwin, yes. Pete,
Emery, yes.
Ali Emery, yes. Pete,
John Beck, yes.
Walter,
Leslie, yes.
Bob,
Petroselli, yes.
and Sean.
Is how's he
Sean's
still
on
here?
mute. He may not be there. We have a large majority in any case, I believe. I think Al had to drop off.
Yes, he
Yes.
did. And
Okay.
Bill did too.
Bill did too. Okay, so the
They
meeting is
voted with
adjourned.
their feet or something, or their
They
mouse.
voted with their clicker. Yep. Good.
Have a good one.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you all for your
Hey,
time.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.